welcome back to another episode of A Date with Diversity. My name is Steph and I'm your host. And today I'm joined with my lovely co-host, Lardan. So for those of you that are new, thank you so much for tuning in, and for everyone returning, thanks again for listening to another episode. So today we are kicking off our Authentic Self series, and we are coming from the perspective of choosing to be your authentic self if you wish to. There's no pressure. We understand that there are many different kind of elements and facets that can affect the way that you present yourself in the workplace. And it's really interesting because I read a LinkedIn post recently which was talking about the fact that being your authentic self is quite a buzzword at the moment. It seems quite popular to talk about, but it focused on the fact that it can be very daunting to be your authentic self. And this particular person was non-binary, so they felt that, is this something that I always have to speak about in the workplace, or is that a part of myself I can kind of keep to myself? So that's what we're talking about today, and this series will just be touching on the different areas of being your authentic self.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting about this sort of choice, because I was watching a webinar and attended a webinar about, it was about bringing your authentic self at work. That was like the title of the webinar, and the panellists were asked, what does that mean to you? And there were panellists who were saying, it's all about being open and feeling free to bring your whole self to work. But one of the panellists was really interesting. She sort of said, well, actually, I want to choose what I should be able to, what I want to bring to the workplace. And that, again, really resonated with me, because it's kind of, it could feel really daunting, a bit like that post, because I also read it, and sort of saying that, now suddenly, if we're going to, it's almost like going to the extreme end of like, we're going to be inclusive, and now we have this expectation that you have to now bring everything and lay everything on the table and tell us all about these kind of potentially really personal things that can also maybe even be traumatic if you're going to talk about it. So what I really liked about the post was it was saying, actually, no, that workplaces should create kind of a culture of where people feel that they have the agency to be able to do that if they wish. So it's like, do they want to say that they are a mum, but be able to, if they said, with no implications or effects on that, but also if they don't want to mention that, that's also okay. No one's going to be like, oh my God, can't believe you didn't divulge that really important information, because actually it won't have any impact on your work. So that's really interesting concept, I think. And
like you said, these things the things that people experience, or the characteristics that you can visually see, is something very personal. You don't know what that person has experienced due to these characteristics. So again, you shouldn't feel forced to be yourself all the time, because actually it's very hard being yourself all the time. And even like within our communities, with our families, our friends, it's hard being yourself all the time. I'm sure there's always sides to yourself that you kind of conceal a little bit. And that's kind of the same in the workplace, and that's also fine. You don't have to tell everything all the time.
It makes me feel like it doesn't always have to like define you. So it's like if there's a characteristic that most people be like, oh, because you are, I don't know, an Asian woman, now you suddenly have to like represent, and that should be like the focus of who you are. But actually, like, maybe that's not who I see as being the only thing about me. There's all these other facets about me. So if I choose to talk about that or engage in that, it's like up to me to be able to. But I guess the point being that if you then did choose to do that, that you're accepted, and that you're there's not going to be any implications of that. So that's that choice bit. It's like, so some people might want to, and it's just being able to do that, but not be an expectation.
No, I agree. So that's why having like a really good work culture is important. But something that I'm a bit on the fence about is this kind of term that we always see in job applications, which is culture fit. And we're looking to see if you fit our culture fit. But what does that actually mean? First of all, I'm just going to say a definition that I found. So it speaks about the likelihood that a job candidate will be able to conform and adapt to the core values and collective behaviours that make up an organisation. And that alone I have a bit of a problem with. I don't like the phrase collective behaviours, because that kind of implies that your individual self is not included in that. You have to just conform to what this organisation is telling you. And I think I said in a previous episode that we spend so much time at work. Why do I now have to change myself just to fit the mold? And I just don't really agree with that because you just, it doesn't really give people the opportunity to shine and to just walk in their shoes rather than walking in the shoes of the organisation. And with that being said, I prefer the term cultural mindset, and having a mindset fit. It's about, what's your work ethic like? How do you see the company? Where can you take the company, whatever industry that's in? It's about having a certain mindset. It's not about just fitting the organisation based off personality traits or your ability to conform. I just think that there's more that you should be looking for in a candidate, and it's about the way that they think, because that is what is going to give them the ability to do the job at the end of the day on a day-to-day basis, not whether they fit your culture or not. Someone could fit your organisational culture but not really do their job well. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the danger in when HR teams or organisations say we're looking for somebody to be fit, our culture fit, would essentially what they might be saying really is we want someone who's similar to what already exists. Right. So you're not enabling your workforce to be diversified essentially. So everything's going to be similar potentially, and that could lead to discrimination, and that kind of sense of actually could put people off really. So if somebody's researching an organisation and they get a sense of the culture of this organisation is a certain way, and clearly they've sort of recruited people that fit into this culture, then there's that danger of just everything really being similar. You're not progressing, potentially even leading to like toxic workplaces and really just not having very good but I really like that idea of a mindset fit rather than a culture fit, for organisations to be focusing more on that.
Studies and research has shown that actually organisations that have a more diverse staff body do better. So clearly it shows that being diverse is good. I don't see why you'd want the same type of person. That doesn't seem that appealing to me, especially as me being like a future business owner. I wouldn't want all of my staff members to be the same, because at the end of the day, like, I would be looking for what individual qualities can you bring to me. It's not about you being like me. Like, I know I am a good person and stuff, but I'm not looking for someone that's like me. Do you know?
No. Well, I think what it doesn't allow for then is like potential for people to like challenge and push boundaries and just have out of the box ideas even, because if you're having everybody that sort of thinks the same or has had the same lived experiences, and you're coming up. So I think one of the things that occurred to me was, I don't know if you heard about this, when they were creating fitness apps. Yeah. They were all essentially men who were creating these fitness apps, and they just didn't take into account things like women's period cycles and stuff like that, because it wasn't in their realm of their lived experience. So from what could have probably been a very good app, just almost like 50% of the demographic, you just hadn't thought about these sort of things. So I think it can actually have really big implications on like your business and your products and the outcomes. So
it will also make you feel like you don't fit in. And again, like I was saying earlier, we spend so much time at work. You want to be able to feel like you fit in, and certain work cultures aren't that inclusive, like by design. We always talk about this, but for example, if a company has a culture where they go to the pub every week, or I don't know, they go to the pub every week, and you're someone that doesn't drink, maybe because your religion tells you to, but also maybe because you just don't really like alcohol. That in itself is excluding you from that activity, which is kind of key to building those relationships with your colleagues. So it's just a thing where you have to really think outside the box and just realise, wait, okay, not everyone drinks. What's an activity we can do that will include more people? Because you might not drink, fair enough, but you also might not be like being around alcohol. So then you wouldn't even think to go to the pub. You'd just simply get on your train home and, enjoy your weekend. So and on kind of another point is, if you are neurodiverse, for example, and people are making like jokes or have banter in the office, you may not understand that, and that's not your fault. Like, that's just the way that your neurology, I don't know what the word is.
Neither.
That's just the way your brain is kind of set up, and that's not your fault, and that's also fine. But again, that's excluding you
Yeah.
from a conversation because you simply don't understand the joke.
Yeah, absolutely. So if organisations are not thinking about that, it's going to make people feel sort of out of place. I had a student who came to me and said, how do I deal with this scenario? And it wasn't quite in the place of work, but I can imagine this would probably apply as well.
Yeah.
She was saying that she is a postgraduate student who was in networking events, but everybody in the networking events were these white, she was a person of colour, and she was saying they're all white males, and they were all talking about hunting, and she was like, how do I even get further in my career if that's all they're talking about? How do I even progress? And so she was feeling that she didn't belong in that place, and that could obviously lead to even things like retention in the workplace. You know, things like small talk. There's this like really example that just resonates with me. Again, it's kind of like when you have small talk in the office, and if you're talking about, I don't know, going on ski trips or going on like doing certain types of activities that maybe you wouldn't have done in your family, or it's just not within your culture. And again, you're like, oh no, how do I engage with that? And then it's a sense of, oh, I'm in the wrong place. You don't ever think of it as being a culture of the organisation or the people. So you sort of go, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I need to go and look for another job. And I think it also comes down to sort of culture and language.
Yeah.
So I speak Farsi, and I also, I was born in Sweden, so I speak Swedish. And when I think about those languages, we don't really say please. In the way that you do here in the UK, please, thank you. So when I first came to the UK, I remember my deputy head in my school, she would really berate me every time I didn't use the word please, and it was a real struggle for me to like shift. And she obviously perceived it as like, oh my gosh, she's so rude.
So rude, yeah.
Like in Farsi and Swedish, you don't say like, oh, can you pass me that, please? You just sort of say, can you pass me that? And then you hand it, and then I'll say thank you.
Right.
And it was just like, yeah, I just remember that feeling of like having to always be like, oh no, I didn't say please, or you know. And actually even now when I teach my children, I'm always like, you have to say please. You have to say please. But more recently an example came for a student of ours who comes from a different cultural background, and they were saying actually it's really disrespectful in my country to have eye contact in an interview, and they just would not, you know, in the practice interview would not show any eye contact. And obviously in the UK that would be perceived actually as being rude.
Right.
But also neurodiverse students might have difficulty, or other people might have difficulty if you're really anxious, you know, having eye contact. So in scenarios like interviews, could you just imagine some employers going, oh no, this person's so rude, like I'm not going to hire them. So again, it's really important for organisations to be aware, and also if that is something that you like, even handshakes, you know, if that things like that, handshakes, eye contact, is not something that you're comfortable with, my little tip would be that, you know, feel free to address that with the organisations, to let them know, look, this is my culture, or this is how I am, like handshakes are not something I'm comfortable with. But hopefully again, we're, you know, working towards making aware, you know, that organisations are aware that, you know, people are different, and there's all these other implications other than just conforming to like the norm and the standard.
Right.
It doesn't make you a bad employee or a rude person
Yeah.
because you don't follow, you know, those standards that have been set.
Yeah, I just thought of something else when you was talking about people that are neurodiverse, and actually that's why I think some organisations have, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a culture fit, but maybe part of the application process, maybe I'm slightly going off topic, but when they have psychometric testing, I think that should be scrapped, because if you're neurodiverse, you might really struggle with that. Like, I've got friends that are dyslexic, and one in particular, she's so fearful of them because the types of jobs, the type of career she wants, she probably needs to do psychometric testing.
Yeah.
But she's dyslexic, so the way that she views things is so different, and she doesn't do very well in them. But that doesn't mean she wouldn't be the best person for the job.
Right.
It's just that she can't get her foot in the door because of this test. And I think it needs to be scrapped. I don't really understand how it relates to the job half the time. I don't know, that in itself seems a bit exclusive. And I don't know what they're looking for when they do those types of tests, but that's not a marker of how someone's going to perform in the job itself. So I think with psychometric testing, that needs to just like get cut, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just think it's not fair. Like, you should judge people on how they perform in the interview. I'm not saying don't do testing, but maybe do tests that are more relevant to the role to see if they'd actually be able to do it rather than looking.
I think that's the point about recruitment processes, and I think that leads to that culture fit in that we're looking for a certain type of person, and historically the people who do well in these types of tests is who we've had in our workforce. So we're going to follow the same thing we've done, and our scoring methods and how we assess people. And again, it's all based on historic data, but if your historic data is all based on a certain type of person that you've historically recruited, then your recruitment process isn't a good fit for opening those doors and making sure it's more diverse. So again, like things like scrapping CVs or not looking at what universities or schools people have gone to, all of these things are working towards making your organisation a bit more diverse, hopefully.
Hopefully, but I don't know how well organisations are doing with that. There are many facets and layers to kind of the implications of how the company culture will affect an individual. So that could include feeling like you have to code switch, feelings of being an imposter within yourself, so imposter syndrome, also covering. These are all topics we will cover in future episodes, but these are all things that people experience, and that makes their career life a lot harder. And it's important to kind of remove barriers to stop that from happening as much as possible. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think that's the key thing here, is that often people will put the blame on themselves. So they'll be like, oh no, I'm in the wrong place, I'm in the wrong workplace, or I'm in the wrong field, or so it's all about, like, it ends up being about you and feeling like you're in the wrong, essentially, but you're not. So one of the things that we would advise students to do is to do research on the organisation that you want to work for, and the sector really, and do your due diligence. So have a look at at organisations' websites, look at their data, even on things like retention, around underrepresented groups, marginalised groups. How well are they doing? What are they saying about themselves? But also what they're saying about themselves, do their actions also mirror that? So have a look at their website, have a look at LinkedIn, look at different kind of sources of information. And one of the really good places to I say look at, but to think about, is to speak to either current or past employees of the organisations, to get a sense of, like, what is it really like to work there? What is the culture of the company? But you can also ask in interviews. You can ask the interview in the interview, what's the culture of the company? But also other things, what are their working hours like? Kind of what are their expectations, and that all of that fits into the bigger picture of, like, what the culture of the organisation is. And like I said even before, like, looking at the teams, there are some organisations that are really good at being vocal about what they do, and there's also things like social mobility index that you can check. Not saying that if an organisation isn't on that, but they're suddenly not inclusive, but it's a good indication. So the more you can do your research, if that is something that's really important, where you want to go, am I going to fit in here, is this going to be a good place for me to be, is to do that. And we also do a workshop at King's, particularly for Careers Plus students, called Researching Inclusive Employers. So attending workshops like that and getting an understanding of, like, what do you think is a good culture for you, and seeing if it sort of matches that as well. So it's kind of your personal perspective and what's inclusive to you. So what might be an inclusive workplace for me, and a good culture fit might be different to you, and making sure that it fits with what it is that you're looking for.
And I think on the flip side of that, looking at what employers could do, or just people on the other side, I think the main message I want to get across is that difference is beautiful. I know it sounds really cliche, but difference really is beautiful, and it will allow you to see things from a different perspective and a different way. So it shouldn't be a thing where you're being diverse to tick a box, or you're being diverse because that's the trend at the moment. It's being diverse because you genuinely see the value in it. And alongside that as well, if you are going to be diverse, if you are going to recruit a larger pool of people from different backgrounds, make sure that you have things in place that will make them feel comfortable. For example, one that just came off the top of my head, if you want to employ, like, Muslim individuals, for example, make sure there's a prayer room, make sure there's somewhere that they can go and pray, because that's part of their life as well. And again, I think I spoke about this, or maybe we spoke about this in our last episode, just about you shouldn't have to like stop being your true self because of work.
Yeah.
If you need to pray 5 times a day, you need to pray 5 times a day, and there should be facilities that will allow you to do that, because trust me when I say employers, like I'm looking, people really appreciate when you kind of go that extra mile, that extra step for them. And I don't see why you wouldn't, because I'm sure they wouldn't want to work in a place that doesn't allow them to do something that's part of their religion. And I just think, yeah, difference is beautiful. Make sure you employ for the right reasons. Make sure that everything you're doing is intentional and not just because it's cool to do it.
No, and I think students or graduates are definitely much more clued up on that.
Yeah.
So it's not something that you can just sort of like pretend that you're doing.
Right.
Like I said,
no.
if you scrutinise the data and you scrutinise those organisations, it's going to be clear if it's a tick box exercise or whether you authentically and genuinely mean it. And that will also be shown in like retention, and also once you start an organisation and you realise that actually this isn't what it was portrayed to be. It's also okay for you to, well, if you want to sort of challenge that, or if you need to leave and you can, I know that's a privilege.
Yeah.
But if you can, then there's nothing wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, because it's really hard to know what a place is like until you actually start there. So you can do all the things that I advise you to do, but you won't really know until you start. But there are things that you can do. But I really do hope that organisations will recognise it, and actually, rather than just for a moral and ethical reasons, which in itself should be good enough, but actually for business and for productivity and all that sort of stuff, actually it's really beneficial, so it makes sense to do it.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense to do it for sure. So that's the end of this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. I hope you enjoy this authentic self series that we are starting. So be sure to follow us on all social media, which is at King's Careers, on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. And with that being said, I will leave you today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Bye.